For the first time ever, a national party's workforce is unionizing. After months of negotiations, staff at the Democratic National Committee are set to join the Service Employees International Union.
DNC Chair Jamie Harrison endorsed the decision, saying, quote, Democrats strongly believe in the positive value of unions and respect the rights of employees to have a union wherever a majority of the workforce wants one, including at the DNC. Senior Vice President Firehouse Strategies Michael Starr Hopkins and Senior Policy Analyst at the Independent Women's Forum Patrice Onwuka join us now to discuss. Michael, it's kind of interesting that they're joining SEIU. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I recall SEIU actually working to bust one of its own unionization attempts within its own staff, maybe 15, 20 years ago or so, before there was as much pressure as there is on kind of progressive and liberal leaderships to just accept unions. Do you remember that?
I don't, and not to age you, but I think I was probably around high school, maybe late college when that happened.
You weren't following that as a high schooler?
So I may have missed out, but let me say I'm glad to see the DNC stepping up and accepting that the DNC members want to unionize. You know, whenever you're talking about campaigns and unions, it is a tough conversation because there are so many external factors, and campaigns aren't exactly, hard hour kind of jobs, but it's important that everybody have access to healthcare, everyone have access to benefits, and really be able to collectively bargain. So I'm proud to be a Democrat and proud to see Democrats accept that unionization is part of what's going on within the party.
I'm just curious of what the beef was. What did this start because there was some sort of, they just didn't feel like they were being treated correctly, or they want more money? I mean, do we know what the reason was that they decided to do this? Either of you can answer this. Anybody who knows.
I can actually answer that because I was on the presidential campaign cycle when unionization popped up. Campaigns are tough. You have people can get fired at any point. Campaigns can end at any point. And so you lose healthcare, you lose benefits. There's a lot of those factors that go to play. And so especially when you're hiring what are usually a lot of young workers who this is their first or second job, you can really get taken advantage of. And so you saw with the Castro campaign, they were one of the first ones to start the unionization conversation during the presidential debate, and then it took off.
And so
I would just read between the lines of what Michael said, which is that, it's a really bad environment. And some of those folks who talked about mistreatment of workers in the private sector, they could have been mistreating their workers in the campaign trail. I mean, I think the irony, and I think what we're seeing here is a larger conversation about unionization. It's not surprising that for decades, unions have been on the decline. Well beyond like the 1970s. We're going back to the 1950s. And so I think workers are saying, okay, is it really a better deal? Maybe for these campaign workers, it could be, but generally, a lot of workers say absolutely not when they consider how much they're losing in dues compared to how much they may gain in a few extra dollars. And that's for those who actually are able even to secure a job. I think that's why you see in the private sector, there's been a resounding pushback against unions. And the Amazon plant in Alabama is a great example of that.
Well, Patrice, the idea that where do we even start with that? Yes, it's true that unionization and density is down since the 1950s, but to suggest that that's because workers on their own just sat around and met and decided to disorganize themselves is completely ahistorical and ignores the role of kind of neoliberalism coming in and crushing unions, of Volcker jacking up interest rates to make sure that unions are broken so that wages wouldn't continue to keep rising. It ignores Reagan coming in and firing the air traffic controllers as one union workers as one of his first actions, which then signaled to corporate America that it was okay if they broke their own unions. So yes, there are people who were opposed to unions, but it wasn't as if it was the workers. I think what's going on here is interesting, and it reflects kind of a global trend where you're seeing these kind of downwardly mobile younger professional workers, who for the first time since the 1950s people no longer feel like they're going to have kind of a better financial future than their parents had. And so as a result of that, you're seeing these unionization efforts, not just in politics with campaigns organizing, but in media. Our newsroom at The Intercept, organized. You're seeing it across digital media, and you're seeing it across kind of progressive organizations as well. Michael, it's almost as if it's not as if there are kind of individual grievances that are going on, in particular shops that are organizing people, that are pushing people to unionize. Doesn't it feel to you that it's more of a culture-wide thing going on?
It is, and it's the ability to collectively bargain. Look, when I was a public defender in Manhattan, we were part of a union. You're seeing it in BC that they're unionizing. This is a cultural shift that we're seeing, where people are taking advantage of their ability to negotiate together rather than be played against each other. And when you use Amazon as the case for unions not working, I mean, they clearly broke the law when it came to how that union was attempting to vote, or rather the formation of that attempted union, by using boxes that were mislabeled so that votes weren't put in the right place. I mean, there has been a corporate attempt to bust unions for over 30 years. It's nothing new. And you don't try to bust something that you think is harmless. You do it because you're worried that it's going to bring costs up, that it's going to allow people to negotiate and get better deals. That should be what we want for Americans, not this corporate support that empowers only the richest people in the country.
Well, wait a minute. Michael, let me push back here. The idea that corporations want to bust unions and stop there and keep the thumb on their workers, is really rich on me. I mean, because I think there's a misconception, or maybe not enough knowledge about the increase in costs that unions institute for companies for overhead. And it's not necessarily because the wages are rising. It's because you're beefing up your HR staff to be able to deal with different disputes that may arise. Your increased regulatory costs that are associated with it. But you know what happens eventually? Your customers are not able to buy the same services or the same goods at the same level. It also, you end up having an environment where some workers will benefit a little bit more, but broadly, a lot of workers are not necessarily left any better off than before. And I think when young people start moving into management and have to make those financial decisions, recognizing that the bottom line really is an important thing, not just for their shareholders, but also for their ability to hire more workers and beef up wages for everybody, union and non-union. And I think they'll begin to understand why it is that a lot of companies will say, you know what, we can do better for our workers by allowing them to negotiate individually what's best for their unique situations. And in many cases, that has a lot to do with flexibility. It's not just about $1 versus $2.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, even though Harrison did endorse the unionization, some reports are that top DNC officials oppose the unionization effort. So, I mean, I think you make some points there, Patrice, that not everybody is on board with this, that there are some people at the top that don't like these sorts of things. Lord knows the DNC has a lot of money. And they're getting all of those big dollar donors coming in. There's a lot of PAC money influence. A lot of money is coming in. So with all of that money, I'm sure a lot of these workers are seeing it, and they're thinking, I want a piece of that pie. But you, Patrice, you feel like, I mean, if you were to make an argument, I guess you make some points about why it's bad for a company. But if you were going to persuade a person who is thinking of joining a union, thinking of saying, yeah, I'm going to vote yes on this, what would your argument be to them to stop them from doing it?
Number one, I would ask them, how much do they know is going to be taken out of their paycheck in dues? This is before they even get their direct deposit. I mean, after Uncle Sam has come, then you've got to pay the union boss. If the amount of dues that you're paying annually, I looked at stories from some individuals who would say they were 20%, upwards of 20% of their paycheck ended up taken off between union dues and, of course, taxes. Well, maybe just union dues and then taxes aside from that. So that's pretty significant. When you're considering maybe that that extra $100 in my paycheck, I would actually rather have it back. That may be enough to tell someone, that extra dollar that the union may have negotiated for you, it doesn't outweigh what you're going to be paying in dues. And I think the choice is really important for an individual. There are people who, as I mentioned, who will say, money is important, but flexibility is even more important than that. And the ability for me to negotiate the kind of schedule, part-time work, flexible options, especially during the pandemic when I may still have to be able to rush home and take care of a sick spouse or kids who are doing some virtual learning. Those are the kind of individual decisions that I don't think union bosses are going to negotiate for you. And so that ability as an individual to figure out what's best for you and to work with your manager and employer to make that happen, that's how I would appeal to that individual.
Well, Patrice, Michael, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.